Forward TV. The world is thinking.
The thing which is striking about that is that 7% is commonly given as a figure of the absolute minimum that the Chinese government has to continue to achieve to maintain social stability. And it's this process of riding the bull. I mean, you kind of think, 7 to 8% growth sounds great, but, China has been this kind of phenomenal bull market, and the government, in order to keep control, has to keep riding the bull. It has to keep, growth levels up at 7 or 8%. And so it's, it does become a real question, like what was China thinking when it started building up so much money? And, the answer is that it was holding on to a pattern of growth which was very export-led. It was entirely to do with maintaining a low RMB and being able to export the cheap goods to Western countries. And this is kind of like a low-hanging fruit in terms of economic development, that you move the peasants in from the countryside into factories, you increase their productivity, and you pay them cheap wages, and you ship out the Barbie dolls. And there's a need now, as that kind of export ideal of how to run things is not going to work out anymore, that it has to become a more domestic-driven economy. The consumer spending needs to go up. I mean, it is rising. It needs to be very important. It's been rising at 23% over the last year, the domestic spending, and so that's a significant boost for China's possibility to start concentrating more on its own economy. But also with that, then foreign brands are moving in a very appetitive fashion, particularly American and European brands which recognize that their own markets are not so bright. They're all trying to move into China, and so the Chinese home brands have got a particular problem at the moment to be able to compete. And they need to be able to drive their own internal development in such a way that they will actually capture some of this new market which is being created. And so you look at the Chinese brands, and the thing which is extraordinary is that the top 30 companies in China are all state-owned enterprises, with the exception of a couple which are based in Hong Kong, and in that sense are much less Chinese. And you see in China that actually there's state involvement in almost everything above the cottage level. And this is damaging, in particular, when you look at the way in which Chinese businesses start and how they operate, is that, inevitably there's some kind of partnership with the local official, and the local official will have its own little local champion and will requisition land and will provide subsidized energy and will waive regulation to drive the economic growth within that area. And the result of this is just enormous abuses. They undercut standards, there's terrible pollution, and there's also appallingly poor products, on the grounds that these local officials are entering into these profitable partnerships with local developers. And it's artificially cheap what they're actually doing. It's not competitive on a national level, but you have these local officials who are pushing the structure forward, and we see it in many things. I mean, the Sanlu milk is a classic example of how the products are not meeting the kind of standards they should, and it's not because of too little regulation. It's because of too little implementation.